So I listened to Chris, obviously, in his wonderful presentation. And we have our State of the Region forecast conference on the 30th of this month in the Ontario Convention Centre. And so our forecast is quite different. But I don't just want to say Chris says this, I say this, and so forth. I want to get into some deeper issues of the Inland Empire that I don't think Chris has addressed that might be of interest to you as builders. So that's what I'm going for. Chris changed the title of his forecast. Initially, when I received the slides, it referred to the, well, it wasn't quite Godot recession, but you will see in a minute what his slide said. The Godot recession, that term was called out by somebody in the Wall Street Journal, a chief economist for Credit Suisse, and it plays off Waiting for Godot, where there are 5 people in the play, and there is a little boy, he's a messenger, and he appears twice at the beginning and at the end of, well, at the end of the first act, end of the second act. And the 2 of them are waiting for Godot, and every day Godot is supposed to arrive, and then the messenger comes in and says, Mr. Godot cannot come today, he will come tomorrow. And then at the end, it's the same thing. So that was what the Credit Suisse chief economist was going on about, that we call out recessions and then the recession doesn't come. So we'll say it will come at the end of this year, and then at the end of the year, you will say it will come next year, and so forth and so forth. That's the idea. That was the original slide. It's not Gado, it's Godot, but Chris is not the only one to make that mistake. Somebody else also talks about Gado. Godot actually comes from God. I'm not sure if Chris could name one of the 5 people who are in the play, but anyways, he went for the Gado recession. So I thought, maybe he doesn't mean Godot, maybe he means Gado. So I looked up who's Gado, and Gado is Miss Israel, who pronounces her name, by the way, Godot, and she's Wonder Woman. So then I was wondering, is Chris going to go for a Wonder Woman recession? But I couldn't figure it out, so, and unfortunately he's left, so he cannot clarify that. That, by the way, is the messenger. And I forgive you if you don't see the similarity, because the picture was taken in 2000, so I've aged a little since then. But the theater critic at the time said the little boy of Mr. Godot is Manfred Keil, and he is, the word genau, precise. So I was the messenger. I was the messenger before Chris Thornworth was born. And I've decided if there is a recession, I will call him and I will say, Chris, Mr. Godot has arrived. Okay? All right. So here's something also that Chris sort of presented about forecasting, but it's not quite accurate. He talked about the yield curve, and I will show you the yield curve in a minute, the difference between the 10-year government bond and the 3-month Treasury bill. And he says there is no causal story, it's a correlation, suggesting that, you know, maybe this time it's different and so forth and so forth. Think, and Chris alluded to that, think of images when you think about recessions. And the image that I want you to think about is a volcano. And the volcano breaks out from time to time, and it has disastrous consequences. If you don't forewarn people in time, they're still in the fields or sitting on the beach, and they will die. And so how do you warn of a volcano outbreak? Volcanologists have sensors. And around the volcanoes, they place these sensors. Now, these sensors don't cause the volcano outbreak, but they will tell you if you're in the alarm period, which we call 12 months before the recession. So we have a variety of these sensors around the volcano, and we're looking at them and combine, just as volcanologists do with a statistical model, they combine these sensors to figure out, is the outbreak imminent? Meaning, are we in the last 12 months of the current expansion? One way to figure this out is not work that we're doing, but that was originally done at MIT, and then the National Bureau of Economic Research, and then they sold it to the Conference Board. The Conference Board is the umbrella organization of businesses in the United States. And it's called an Index of Leading Economic Indicators. And indeed, it is something like these sensors around the volcano. They combine it in, frankly, a bit of a strange way, into one index. And that index is published monthly in the Wall Street Journal at the Conference Board, right? If you want a historical time series, you have to purchase it. But, you know, you can see before every recession, it turns down. And where is it currently, right? Chris didn't show that graph. Here is the one that he showed, except for he showed the difference between the two. I've actually separated them, kept them apart. So the shaded areas, if you can see them, are recessions. And if the red line goes above the blue line, that's when the yield curve inverts. Now you can go back all the way to the 60s. There have not been any false positives. A false positive is if you have the coronavirus, if you don't have it, and you test positive for it, okay? So here, there are no false positives. The yield curve inverts, and there's a subsequent recession. When did it invert? Last October, right? So that's one of the indicators we use. And by the way, I don't want to spend a lot of time. So I'm going to take you on the ride with me to look at these sensors, right? So here's another one that is closer to your heart. It's the 12 months difference in housing starts in the United States. Very good sensor. Again, look at, if I'm not sure if the gray lines show which are recessions, but if they go negative, subsequently there is a recession. And where are they? Negative. Right? Here's another one. This is by somebody at the Federal Reserve, or used to be at the Federal Reserve, Claudia Sam. And she looks at the unemployment rate over the last 4 months, takes the average, so currently that's 3.6. And then she compares it with the average over the previous year. And if that short-term one goes up, then a recession starts, okay? It will go up over the next 2 months if in each one of these months the unemployment rate goes up by 0.1 percentage points. So if in the near future it sits at 3.8, meaning in May, then it will be positive, meaning we're at the start of where this thing goes up, right? That's where we are. I'm simply showing you the sensors that I'm looking at. Believe it or not, this actually is one that currently doesn't ring the bell. This is at the University of Michigan, where they ask consumers in a sample, are you willing to buy durables, like an iPhone? And that's called the Consumer Sentiment Index. It's free for you. Go to the University of Michigan, find it. That's where we are currently. You can go across. There haven't been many times, 1979 being the last time, when consumer confidence has been that low. I don't think that the sort of signals that I'm showing you are consistent with, I think, what Chris was talking about. However, the good news is, over the last 6 months, this actually has gone up. And since, in our analysis, we look over the last 6 months, this really bad sensor actually doesn't look that bad, okay? And that's our last one. It's the average number of hours worked in manufacturing in the US. So why is that such a good sensor? It's because manufacturing is more sensitive to recessions than other economic variables, right? The service sector doesn't suffer that much. It's manufacturing. And so if the average hourly work week in manufacturing goes down, again, it goes down before every recession, okay? So that's it. I don't want to go more into what our probability of a recession is. This was Chris's show in many ways. So I simply want you to take away some food for thought, right? It's not all as rosy as he made it look, I believe. But then again, that's my opinion, and I'm at a different organization than he is. So we'll go from there. There are 4 other points that I want to address with you, and they are, I think, directly related to builders and what builders have to think about the Inland Empire. And the first one is, Chris alluded to that, a request from the Robert Redford Conservatory to Governor Newsom on a 2-year moratorium of all warehouse buildings. And there are 60 organizations behind that. That letter sits at Newsom's desk, right? And there are 2 bills currently in Sacramento that go towards that, right? And that must be important to you, because if there's no more warehouse building in the Inland Empire, that will also mean there are fewer people who work in the warehouses and fewer people who perhaps can afford to build a house, right? So this has nothing to do with the US recession. This is Inland Empire specific. The second thing I want to talk about is something that Chris also alluded to, automation, and the effect that automation will have on the Inland Empire, right? Not automation in general in the US. And I want to bring up something that you have heard about, ChatGPT, which he didn't talk about at all. So all of you should look at ChatGPT. I did it in terms of, I publish every 2 weeks in the Southern California News Group a column, and I asked ChatGPT, what is the current economic situation in the Inland Empire? Give me a 750-word essay. And we published it with our answers to it, right? And there's some pretty amazing facts in it, what they get right and what they get wrong. But this will affect all of you. This is, for the first time, white-collar automation. The automation we've seen so far is blue-collar automation. It's robotics and artificial intelligence. This is white-collar automation, okay? And then finally, I want you to take very quickly on a ride with me what a currently 10-year-old is about to face in the time when he's 30 years old, when he's ready to build a house in the Inland Empire. Yeah? So I want you to give an outlook, not on next year. You've heard enough from Chris, maybe from me. Let's look long-term at the Inland Empire. And I think that's really important to builders, right? This is the letter that's sitting on his desk, right? There's 60 organizations that signed off on it. And they're asking for a 2-year moratorium on all warehouse building. The question was why? The claim is that it is diesel truck traffic that causes a lot of the pollution, and that the warehouses have expanded at such a rate that they are closer and closer to schools and other sensitive areas. And therefore the moratorium, right? And there are many flaws in that. It's a 60-page report that is publicly available. There are many flaws, and some of them have been countered. And what we have asked, and to the governor and San Bernardino and Riverside council people, is what we have to do is a cost-benefit analysis of the logistics industry. No one has done this. These groups here say the logistics industry is the devil, right? Other people will say, look at all the jobs that have been created. 90% of all logistics jobs in California since February 2020, the beginning of the coronavirus recession, were created in the Inland Empire. That's a fact. That's why we have the low unemployment rate. We are the powerhouse of California at the moment. There is no other region that grows employment-wise as much other than Stockton, Lodi. Okay? So how can I motivate you to come along with me on this cost-benefit analysis? These people will claim that there are deaths that result because of the warehouse building, namely there are cancer particles floating around, asthma, and so forth, right? And let me put it this way. There's always a trade-off. The last trade-off we saw was with the coronavirus. Some states decided to shut down, pretty much, California being one, right? Other states stayed completely open. Disney World remained open, right? South Dakota never shut down. Well, what was the consequence in South Dakota? Have the 7th highest mortality rate from it. We have one of the lower ones, right? So there's always a trade-off. I'll give you another trade-off. In the United States, 30,000 people every year die on the roads. That's a fact. Okay, 30,000 people every year. I have a very simple policy to reduce that to 0. Here's the policy. We put a speed limit on all roads for 5 miles an hour. Deaths will be 0, I promise you. So are we willing to let 30,000 people die? Yeah, unfortunately, that's called the statistical value of life, right? And it's the same thing here. I'm not saying that the logistics industry is God's gift to the Inland Empire, right? But it generates an immense tax income, it generates housing, it generates all sorts of things, right? And just looking at the costs is not the proper way to do it. You have to look at the benefits as well. And no one has done that. There's no cost-benefit analysis of the logistics industry. And that's why these groups can get away with it, right? These are the 2 ABs that are currently being discussed in Sacramento. If you thought this is just some wild environmentalists, these are ABs. And I've listed them by number. And by going on them, you can click and find out the exact text where they are. And this is, we're talking complete moratorium, right? The one that is stricter will forbid all heavy diesel traffic within city limits. I don't know how Vaughn's is going to deliver, right? And by very early. So these are serious threats, not to be taken easy, right? This has nothing to do with the recession. 4th Industrial Revolution. So a friend and colleague of mine at the Inland Empire Economic Council is Johannes Munoz. He's at Redlands. And he specializes in looking at the degree of automation that will affect regions in the United States. And basically what he does is he looks with all of us at tasks. So there are certain things that you cannot replace me with a computer, but certain tasks that I do, you can. And then he figures out what % of my tasks can be automated, okay? And then he looks at the employment situation in various regions of the United States, and therefore projects who will lose the jobs. There are 384 metropolitan statistical areas in the United States. The Inland Empire is number 5 in jobs that are going to be lost to automation. Think about it. It's warehousing, it's trucks driving, right? These things will be automated. I don't know, I don't think this is close to your heart. 96% of accountants will be replaced, right? With college professors, it's only 13%, and with preachers, it's only 3%. So I'm safe because I preach economics, so I'm fine. but there are others who might be in trouble, right? So this is not to be taken lightly, like Chris did. Automation, particularly with the logistics industry, will really hit home, right? There will be trucks where you drive 3 trucks, one in between is without a driver, okay? I don't know if you've been in some hotels or some bars where a machine, a robot, dishes out a cappuccino, right? When I go to Silicon Valley, I stay at the Aloft Hotel. There's a robot that brings the food to the room, right? And the newspaper, okay? So all that I'm saying is you got to be aware of this, right? Now here it comes. ChatGPT, which is this new AI program that came out last November, which has created havoc in high schools and universities, right? And in many ways, people writing their first analysis by asking ChatGPT, right? It's going to primarily affect white-collar workers. And so that's good news for the Inland Empire, because the Inland Empire is not really white-collar workers, right? There are some. I'm not denying that you exist. But there are majority blue-collar workers, and they will be least affected. But here it comes. 35% of the labor force in the Inland Empire commutes to coastal areas. 35%. Okay? Why do they commute? Because they love to commute? I Googled the time it takes from Upland, where I live, to downtown LA. That's 37 miles, okay? Doesn't take a rocket scientist. If you drive 60 miles an hour, you should be there in 37 minutes. The slowest time to go from Upland into downtown LA is on a Thursday morning at 7. It takes 2 hours 10. And the worst return time is on a Thursday at 5, 2 hours 20. So if you do that, we're talking 4.5 hours. You don't do that because you like to commute, right? Why do you do it? You do it because your human capital is not high enough to live and work in the coastal area. That's why you can't afford a house. So you come out here and you commute. Why do you not work here? Because your human capital is higher than the human capital of the people who work out here and live out here, right? So therefore you commute, okay? Remember what I said, these people have lower human capital than the ones who live in the coastal area. So who's going to get replaced by ChatGPT? The commuters, right? Their jobs are going to go first. And if they become unemployed, they come back here and spend less. And that will have an impact on the Inland Empire, right? So that's ChatGPT. The final one, here's the good news. 384 MSAs in the United States, okay? New York is the biggest, Los Angeles, it's Greater Los Angeles. They always have 3 names, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim, right? Out of those, until 2019, we in the Inland Empire were the 13th largest. Last year, we passed San Francisco. We're now the 12th largest MSA in the United States, out of 384. 4.6 million people live in the Inland Empire. That's 12% of Californians. 12% of Californians reside in the Inland Empire. Okay, what's next up? Oh my God, look at these places. Boston is the next one up. We're almost there, right? So this is fantastic news. Time to celebrate, maybe bring out the champagne corks, right? But do you really want to live in India or China where they have a lot of people? I don't, right? So we measure how well an area is doing by looking at what is produced in that area. It's called GDP. And we divide it by the number of people who live there. That's what Adam Smith called the wealth of a nation. Per capita GDP, basically per capita income, okay? So that's easy to calculate. We've got population in the Inland Empire, and we've got GDP. So why don't we do that? Why don't we divide GDP produced in the Inland Empire, not by the commuters. This is produced by the people who work in the Inland Empire, and we divide it by the people. And where are we? 294. 294. You know what's next to us? Waco, Texas. How do I know about Waco today? I came to this country as a Fulbright scholar to the University of Texas. When Texas plays Baylor, you go. And you go to what we called Waco. And you swim in the Brazos River and regret it. And what's the big industry there? It's Snapple and Dr. Pepper, right? That's Waco, Texas. That's what you want to compare yourself to? I don't think so, right? So what does it mean? It also explains why we have so many commuters. The stuff that we currently produce in the Inland Empire is not a lot of value added, right? And Chris, again, alluded to this. The percent of people with a bachelor's degree or more in the Inland Empire is 22%. In Los Angeles, it's 35%. Right? You've got to invest into education in this area. And you've got to bring up, the firms that we want are not going to come unless you have a labor force that is well educated, right? And these are the people, if you continue on this trend, these are the people who will try to buy houses in 2045. That's not the way to go. So our map that we have suggests that the Inland Empire grows by 0.3 percentage points a year more than it has been, and that Phoenix grows at the same rate. If that is the case, then by 2045 we will catch up with Phoenix, right? But it requires that we have a different type of firm coming here into the Inland Empire and employ those people who then do not have to commute anymore. What is so hard to see? They don't commute because they like it. It's clear to you. I had to go to UCLA yesterday, Anderson School Forecast, right? I don't go anymore the morning because I would have to leave Claremont at 6:30, right? To get there at 9:30. I'm not doing that. And I've got ways. I'm going through the Hollywood Hills where if I go up and a car comes, I've got to back up, right? That's ways for you, but it gets you there in 3 hours, right? So that's not what we want. We want to be in a place where the value added of jobs is such that people don't have to commute. They should work and live here, right? And we're not going to get that if we're going to rely continuously on just warehousing, right? That's the point that I was trying to make here, okay? So three things what three things? How do you go three? There's a movie that if you do this, you get shot, right? Oh, this. So three things to look out for. Forget the forecast for next year. Different people, different opinion. Don't think of Godot. Definitely don't think of Gato. Three things to look out for. The environmental issue that's sitting in Sacramento. That will impact, if they shut down warehouse building, that will impact the area, including housing, right? Second, automation, right? Look out for automation. It's not only the logistics industry that's going to get affected, it's going to be the commuters, and it's the commuters who bought the houses in Riverside County, right, particularly. And the third one, we've got to do something to keep these people from commuting, right? If we have better building industries, they can afford to have houses themselves. And that, again, will have a huge impact on the building industry, okay? So that's all that I was going to say. Come and see me on the 30th of March in Ontario Convention Center, where we have our whole State of the Region analysis. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Manfred.
I'm keeping you from lunch.